Hey everybody, Brian Zane here. Well, AEW Dynamite's back on Wednesdays, and so am I, to give you my review, my first Dynamite review in several weeks since that first Friday show over a month ago. Also, I apologize for no NXT review. Yesterday, I was feeling a bit under the weather last night, so I couldn't watch/record, but I am feeling mostly better tonight, and so I'm able to review Dynamite for you. Also, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who had purchased the Pride edition of the Like What You Like t-shirt over the month of June. After looking at the proceeds that we raised from those shirt sales and matching it, I'm proud to say we're donating $350 to the Trevor Project. So once again, thank you all for your support in that endeavor. And with that out of the way, as we like to say here, like what you like, don't be a dick. Let's begin. Chris Jericho joins the commentary team for this show. It's the final Daily's Place event before they go back on the road, and your opening match sees Eddie Kingston and Penta El Zero Miedo versus the Young Bucks. It's a non-title, but if Penta and Eddie win, then they will get a future shot at the tag belts. And I know I've not been watching Dynamite for the last few weeks. I've been seeing some screen grabs and gifs here and there, but wow, the transformation the Young Bucks have gone under in the last month or so is pretty extreme. I love hearing the announcers react to what they're wearing and the facial hair. Tony Schiavone saying they look like porn stars. It's ridiculous, the look they have, and it's just like, it's a pretty old school classic way to get heel heat, is to look absolutely ridiculous, but also look very good in the ring while you do it. So in case you didn't hear, last week after Dynamite went off the air, Kingston cut this promo to send the fans home happy, and in doing so took a few shots at WWE, which honestly, after hearing the promo and thinking of all the different ways both companies have taken shots at each other in the last 2 years, this was one of the least offensive, most tepid ways of a shot I've ever seen between either of the two companies. But be that as it may, this week Bully Ray on his radio show told Kingston to shut the fuck up and stay in his lane. He didn't like the cut of Eddie's jib in that promo, so Eddie responded to Bully the best way he could in this match by he and Penta doing the "was up," which I thought was pretty clever. Eddie takes a lot of the heat in this matchup here. He tags in Penta finally, and his hot tag is tremendous. He hits Matt with a code red, and Matt does not get his shoulder up in time for the 3 count to end it. Whoop, everyone caught that, but they just waved it off, and oh, no, water under the bridge, not happening here. Then the Good Brothers get on the apron and cause some distraction. Brandon Cutler accidentally sprays Matt with his cold spray, and then as the Elite Hunter Kazarian beats Cutler up, you can still see him like spraying at nothing, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. We get the Fear Factor into the spinning back fist, and that allows Kingston and Penta to win the matchup here, so they get a shot at the Young Bucks next week in Miami for the tag title. So that was a great opening matchup. I'm not liking their chances in the rematch next week, but this was a very fun opener. We see Christian Cage in the back talking with Jungle Boy. He talks about how well he performed in his loss last week to Kenny Omega, how we can make history tonight against Jack Evans with a 50th win in AEW. And then we see Luchasaurus and Marco Stunt enter the room, and they tell him, you had Jungle Boy's back earlier while I was gone, so, basically you're cool with us now. And Christian mentions that he's actually part dinosaur on his mother's side. Then back in the ring, Tony Schiavone interviews Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky. Why is Ethan challenging Darby Allin to a coffin match? Ethan says, he's been trying to cripple Darby physically and it's not getting the job done, so now he wants to cripple him mentally by saying, if I beat you in this coffin match, then I'm going to be in your head, and every time you even think about doing a coffin drop, you're going to think of me. And suddenly Sting comes out and he's wheeling out this coffin on stage, and I suddenly have horrible flashbacks to his match with Abyss. Then we see this video of Darby with an Ethan Page mask, and then he has a flamethrower and he sets this like coffin frame on fire. We cut from that, and Sting pulls the sheet back on the coffin, and Darby pops out of it and he jumps Page and everything. Sting hits the Scorpion Death Drop on Sky. Darby digs his fingernails into Ethan's eyes, and Page powders out of the ring and says he's been blinded, so no coffin match next week because you can't fight fair, you can't play by the rules. So he says you can't touch me for a week until a week before the coffin match, and if you play by the rules and everything, and you play your cards right, you might have this match in time for Fyter Fest, which means we're getting this match at Fyter Fest. I don't like how Tony Schiavone is perpetually misused in these interview segments, and we'll see another example of that later in the show, but I liked Ethan's promo itself, and seeing him balk over the coffin match because, Darby raked his eyes once, and it was just a chicken shit heel move, and knowing their history, the coffin match, when we get to it at Fyter Fest, should be ridiculous. Jungle Boy takes on Jack Evans, and like I mentioned earlier, if Jungle Boy wins this match, he'll be the first guy in AEW to reach 50 wins. We hear a promo from Matt Hardy before the match where basically he says, Jack Evans is his mercenary and he doesn't care if he wins or loses, he just wants Jack to hurt Jungle Jack. It's a pretty good match, but most of it's in picture-in-picture, but it's a good bounce back for Jungle Boy after his loss to Omega last week. He makes Jack tap out to the snare trap, so he does reach that historic milestone, the first AEW wrestler to hit 50 wins. The Hardy family office show up to cause trouble, but then we see the Jurassic Express and Christian Cage show up to break it up. Cage and Hardy brawl for a bit until Matt is saved and he's led to the back and stuff, continuing their feud from the last couple of weeks. Match was okay. The fallout, I think, was the more exciting part of it. With Jungle Boy, it felt like it was more of a foregone conclusion. We get a pre-tape promo from MJF where he brings up his history with Chris Jericho and how he's outsmarted him, outfoxed him, out-wrestled him, etc. over the last several months, but how Jericho can't let go and that he used to be a wrestling genius, but now he's a joke and he's made AEW his own perverse version of Looney Tunes, in his words. He says next week he'll reveal the stipulations Jericho must complete in order to get one final match with MJF in the future. Sounds very similar to the storyline we had with MJF and Cody early last year. And then he switches over to Sammy Guevara and their match for later in the night. He says Guevara is the future because MJF is the now. Very good monologue here. Then elsewhere backstage, Alex Abrahantes interviews Andrade El Idolo, talks about his beef with Matt Sydal when he had the audacity to interrupt him last week. And so Andrade's calling him out for a match next week in Miami at Road Rager. Then back in the ring, Tony Schiavone interviews the world champion Kenny Omega, who's sporting his own ridiculous facial hair this week. Like Ethan Page did earlier, he just yanks the microphone out of Tony's hands and does his own promo. And like, look, I know this has been going on for a long time, and I've talked about it occasionally, the fact that they get interrupted all the time and these interviews never go the way they're supposed to. Another thing is, if you're going to have somebody doing these interviews, why bother having them there if the wrestler's just going to take the microphone out of the guy's hand and do his own thing, and Tony just stands there looking like a dork. Kenny talks about all the greats he's beaten in AEW and says there's no one left. And when a heel says there's no one left for him to face, that means there's always somebody left to face, like right after he says that. Sure enough, the Dark Order come out from the back, and Evil Uno says, you know, it's not us that we're talking about to challenge you, but our friend Hangman Page. And so Omega basically says that Hangman doesn't have the guts to challenge him and he wouldn't be able to beat him anyway. Omega bids them adieu, and then they kind of like part the seas and let him walk out. I thought it was interesting that they would speak for Hangman like that, the way Evil Uno did. And then a few segments later, we actually see Page confronting the Dark Order, mad as hell about what happened. Like, how dare you make this challenge for me? Do you think I'm scared of Kenny Omega? And then we get this really wholesome moment where all the Dark Order members are just kind of like cheer him up and encourage him and fill him full of like good vibes and say, you know, it's like, you know, you fear failure, but there's nothing wrong with failure. We believe in you and you can do this. And they'll kind of like pat him on the shoulders. They walk off and they say, your time is now. We believe in you. Just good, wholesome stuff from the Dark Order here. You'll love to see it.
If you're not listening yet, here's what you're missing on This Week in Regret podcast.
I just like everything. People accused me of being a WWE shill because I liked Hell in a Cell this past weekend. But in the same breath, people will say I'm an AEW shill because I would pick them to win and who worked better. Like it matters.
I actually, it's funny, so as I showed up, I was shaking hands with some of the guys. They were like, hey, you know, someone skipped out doing commentary, do you want to? And I said, you know what, I can do it with my old pal, so I sat there and pretty much just had some fun. And
so you came to watch the show, and then you got roped into doing commentary.
Pretty much, that's the world of the indies. I did get a payout, though. It's the lowest payout I've taken in 10 years, but yes.
Fun and topical, This Week in Regret podcast with Brian Zane and me, Jay Biggs. If you haven't subscribed yet, follow the link below.
We get a nice babyface promo from Brian Pillman Jr. where he talks about Miro and his actions against Griff Garrison recently and how that drove things over the edge from business to personal. So now Brian says it's not just about the TNT Championship, it's about revenge. He vows to make Miro just turn into a big Bulgarian bitch. And we go to that match now, TNT Championship as Miro, the Redeemer. That's his new nickname, taking on Brian Pillman Jr. I like this little change in Miro's thing, going from the best man to this new theme song, this new nickname, God's favorite champion and everything. It's a bit messianic, and it's just, I think it's a nice change of pace from what we've seen from Miro in the last several months, and I want to see more of it. It's a pretty basic match, but well executed. Miro to spend several minutes just dominating Pillman here, but finally, Pillman gets a bit of a comeback, some running drop kicks, a couple of super kicks, but ultimately Miro snuffs him out with two big kicks of his own, puts on the game over, and Pillman passes out. Miro defends the championship here. That was, again, pretty good match. Pillman makes a very good, plucky babyface, and was a great foil for Miro to keep continuing that thread, that narrative of Miro being this absolutely cold-blooded killer. We get some breaking news from Team Taz. We see Taz backstage with Hook and Powerhouse Hobbs at his side. He says the beef between Cage and Ricky Starks has gotten too much now and something must be done about it. So he announces that on July 14th in Austin, Texas, Cage will defend the FTW title against a medically cleared Ricky Starks. And to me, that's great news because when he got that neck injury after the big high German suplex from Hangman Page a few weeks ago, I thought, man, like worst case scenario, he'll be out for a year or something. That'll really suck. But to hear he's going to come back and be medically cleared so soon, that's great news. It's a huge relief because I think Ricky Starks is somebody who AEW kind of needs in that kind of up-and-coming heel character, that spot. I think Ricky Starks is very good in his role, and I think that him being back in the ring is just going to be great news overall. So our next match sees Dr. Britt Baker and Rebel taking on Nyla Rose and Vickie Guerrero in a tag team match. You heard me, the manager is wrestling tonight. Apparently this match was made 2 weeks ago when Vickie declared that she wanted Nyla to get the first shot at the Women's Championship. Then she requested this match herself. But why? Because I never knew Vickie Guerrero to be a really bold or, in-your-face kind of manager who gets physical and stuff. This match was a whole lot of why for me, because there's no reason for Vickie to be able to kick out of anything that Rebel gave her, or for her to do any moves. Because as much of a lackey and a flunky and a jobber that Rebel's been booked as for the last several months, she's still a trained wrestler. And Vickie is not. Like, Vickie wasn't doing this shit 10 years ago when she was WWE, so I don't understand why she's doing it now. It just makes no sense to me. It happens on more than one occasion where Vickie actually gets a slip on Rebel, and that makes no sense to me. Late in the match, Rebel breaks up a pinfall, but in doing so seems to injure her right leg, because as soon as she hits the ground, she is just like done. She seems to be frozen in pain, unable to move, to the point where Nyla has to like push her into the ropes in order for the match to continue, which was really scary. She's to be in a lot of pain. Hope she's okay. In the end of the match, though, Britt's got the lockjaw on Vickie. Again, Vickie struggles a bit more than she should for a manager for that move. So anyway, Britt wins for her team, but right afterward, Nyla powerbombs Britt once in the ring, then again through the table on the floor on the outside. So nice dominant babyface challenger, just absolutely obliterating the heel champion here. So, Vickie getting involved as much as she was in this match was 6 shades of stupid, but Nyla beating up Britt in the end kind of made up for it. And again, really hope that that Rebel, I should say, is okay after that leg injury. We got a promo from Jake Hager and Santana and Ortiz. They're talking about Wardlow and FTR in preparation for their 6-man tag match next week in Miami. And they say that since Tully Blanchard's going to be in the Pinnacle's corner, they're going to have Conan in theirs. And then we go to our main event. Speaking of the Pinnacle versus the Inner Circle, we've got MJF versus Sammy Guevara. This match, months in the making, and we saw this big war of words for weeks and weeks between these two. And a lot of barbs traded over on Twitter, which were really stupid. Even if it's a work, the stuff they were doing on Twitter to each other did not help this angle in the least. That being said, it was a pay-per-view quality match. I mean, these guys were given a lot of time, and they went balls to the wall here. There were springboards, there were destroyers, there were springboard destroyers, there were chair shots, there was crazy stuff happening here. At one point, Sammy doing an RVD-esque somersault plancha off the top into the crowd onto MJF, which was absolutely ridiculous. Plenty of big near falls and kickouts. In the end, though, Sean Spears dinks Sammy in the head with a steel chair after Wardlow disposes of Jericho on the stage. MJF crawls over to Sammy and pins him to win the match. And man, what a heartbreaker of a loss for Sammy there after all that. It's hell of a contest, such a cheap way for MJF to get that win, but it's all building up to his inevitable final contest with Jericho, where you hope justice prevails and everything. But man, these MJF and Sammy, or MJF and Jungle Boy, these matches that these guys have been having with each other, it's like the future of AEW / wrestling in general looks really bright in my opinion when you've got guys like these pulling out ridiculous main event style matches like we saw here tonight. And then one final thing to close out the show, they do a nice emotional and heartfelt video tribute package to the Daily's Place run they had from that first empty arena show where Brody Lee and Matt Hardy debuted up until the last couple of shows with the full crowds and everything, really getting the whole scope of what went down in AEW in those last 60 weeks. And I love this little subtle move. First of all, they made me cry again when they showed the highlights from the Brody Lee tribute show. You made me cry again, you bastards, you damn good editors, you storytellers, you. And then after that, though, you can hear the crowd start to swell, the noise kind of fading in gently, and then it comes this big roar as you see the crowds kind of coming in to the stands and everything from the last couple of months, which I thought was a really well done move. But yeah, very good package to end the show on. my grade for this week's Dynamite is a B-, a mostly good show. I have to admit the women's tag team match is the worst thing about this show. It was a double whammy. It was dumb for how much stuff Vickie Guerrero got in when she shouldn't have, and it was unfortunate because Rebel got hurt, so 2 strikes against it. But I think the show started really strong and ended really strong. It was a great opening tag match and a fantastic main event with MJF and Guevara, and everything else on the show was pretty solid, setting up a lot of stuff, not just for Fyter Fest and for All Out, but also just for next week and their return to the road in Miami. So very good show here. But what did you think about Dynamite this week, folks? What's your favorite memory of the Daily's Place pandemic era of Dynamite? I want to hear what you have to say in the comments section below. I can't wait to be back here next Wednesday night for another Dynamite review. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.